Fueled by the media, fear and panic spread quickly, fracturing and dividing the country until at last the true goal comes into view.
Broadcasting from Brisbane, Australia, this is the FOMO Show.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Joe.
And this is a fortnightly podcast where we talk about the exciting ideas changing the world today and what might change the world tomorrow.
We'll help you stay across what's going on so you don't get the fear of missing out.
You can find us at FOMO.show or by searching for the FOMO Show on your platform of choice.
Everything in the show is in the show notes. You can find links to the stuff we're talking about and timestamps to the relevant parts, so you can always skip ahead or find it later if we're still alive.
So this episode, if we get to the end of it without being quarantined, is we'll be talking about a few spots of bother in the world right now.
We've got coronavirus, we've got world markets on fire, oil wars, there's just an absolute steaming pile of whatever, and a lot of financial instability.
But more importantly, we discuss what happened during some previous crises around the world.
We're going to talk about how central banks are actually looking to steal money from savers and what they're planning for negative interest rates.
And we're also going to look at smart ways to keep protected and calm through a media-fueled crisis.
So very exciting. No need to panic too much. Yes.
Don't panic. This podcast is not investment or any other type of advice.
We're not saying you should buy anything at all or sell everything because it's going to zero.
Yeah, so full disclosure, we're both personally invested in different shares, funds, cryptocurrencies, and face mask companies, some of which we talk about on this show.
But if we talk about a product or anything you can buy, it doesn't mean you should buy it.
So do your research, never invest more than you can afford to lose, and most importantly, avoid the fear of missing out.
So what have you been up to the last couple of weeks, mate?
Not much. I've just been sitting back. I've got my sunglasses on, got a cup of whiskey, which is, getting refilled. And I'm basically just watching the markets burn, sitting at home with my apocalypse stash, which I purchased weeks ago, watching the world burn, watching people steal toilet paper from shops.
Right.
Just a whole bunch of strange, but sadly predictable human behavior kind of playing out. And the reason I'm, feeling so secure is that I've purchased Jim Backer's Silver Solution.
It was only a matter of time before all sorts of so-called treatments connected with coronavirus would pop up. Even notorious televangelist Jim Bakker is hawking one on television. But at least one group of medical experts is calling it a fraud.
This is amazing. Order silver now.
Oh, please no.
Yeah, so look, I'm feeling great, mate. I've found the cure.
Mate,
I've found the cure.
You'll survive the apocalypse, no doubt.
What have you been up to?
Mate, I've been reveling in the panic, much to the dismay of. Do you know? I've been chatting to a couple of people who are actually quite invested in the markets, and they're not as, I guess, upbeat as I might be. Probably because I've been a perma bear for years, and. It's finally nice to see the markets go down a bit, but it's not so good for people who've lost out. But you don't lose until you cash out, But yeah, I've been doing very little to prepare for the coming dark age. I've just been working, really. Yeah,
okay.
That's been it.
Just head down, just as everything crumbles around you, essentially.
Yeah, lovely times. No need to panic.
Good. Are you certain that you're private and safe online?
Check out our new resource at FOMO.show/privacy. It's a great repository of our favorite tools to understand and improve your online security.
And if you're new to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, blockchain tech, you can check out our Blockchain Basics series, which covers the fundamentals. And that starts from episode 2, way back in the FOMO archives, and continues on until episode 8.
This feature is all about remaining calm because we're in a bit of a perfect storm at the moment for complete disaster and panic. So we are going to take a very irreverent look at what's going on, trying to avoid the FOMO where we can.
What a bother up at Elroy Farm.
Global hot zones, the coronavirus spreading.
Fears grow of a global pandemic.
A huge spike in cases in Italy.
Hundreds of cases in South Korea. New cases reported in Europe.
The CDC warned Americans to be prepared here at home, that it's not a matter of if, but when.
Thought you might want to do something.
What exactly were you thinking?
Pub?
I have to question the way that the media is fanning the flames of hysteria and panic here and around the world.
Go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all this to blow over. How's that for a slice of fried gold?
Yeah, boy!
You got to sit back and just look at it and laugh, don't you? I mean, really, mate. I'd love to be a psychologist at the moment, just watching all this play out, because it is just fascinating to watch human nature. Because everything's televised, with the internet, we can look at all of this, and it's probably the first event of its kind, of this kind, that's played out when everything's been connected. So, we're getting a really interesting look into the way that internet kind of feeds that hysteria and feeds all the different media narratives and everything else. So, how the internet plays into that, and then also we're getting a view into what people are doing in response. And just like I said before, the sadly predictable ways that people just panic because essentially they're told to panic.
None of us trust the media, but for some reason it seems to lead all those conversations. So let's foment a bit of panic over this coronavirus. Now, it's sort of like a pretty serious flu that's very easy to catch, and it's, worst case scenarios are saying it's going to affect millions and millions and millions of people, so most of the world, and unless you have immune deficiencies and or you're old and frail or young and frail, you're generally going to survive it. A lot of people have survived it already, but it's pretty scary. It's all that you can see in the headlines. It's all everyone sees on social media, and we'll start with one headline. A doctor said that this is the most frightening disease I've ever encountered in my career. What else has been going on?
There was also Italy, for example. The virus touched down there a couple of weeks ago. I remember seeing the news about the first case that touched down there in Italy, and it pretty rapidly spread. And they've now basically placed the whole of Italy in lockdown. So there's nationwide restrictions all over the place, curfews. There's prohibitions against people gathering in certain amounts. And it looks like other countries are kind of looking to Italy as almost like an example of what people should be doing.
Yeah, you got border issues going on there as well. And you got concern about potential food riots and shortages. That's quite an interesting one. And I'm sure many of our listeners have experienced trying to buy toilet paper in the last few weeks.
Yeah, look, if you're listening to this and a long time in the future, it's kind of topical at the moment, but particularly here in Australia, I think there's other areas of the world where it's very similar. People have just been buying up all the toilet paper, which is bizarre, very, very bizarre to me. When I did my apocalypse shop about 6 weeks ago, I bought some toilet paper, but it definitely wasn't the thing I thought would be off store shelves. Most of what I got was canned food, rice, some sanitary goods, all sorts of canned stuff, and just long life food. And I've got some toilet paper, but it's just bizarre.
Well, either way, we're gonna towards the end of the show, we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can thrive and survive in crises like this without running out of bog roll. So we'll crack on with that. Interestingly, 290 million plus students around the world are facing weeks at home.
Yeah, and that's like a lot of universities are shutting things down. A lot of schools are shutting things down, and I've actually heard, funnily enough, that there's a lot of support tickets being opened with companies like Cisco, for example, because everyone is trying to work out how to keep people learning and being part of the schooling system while they can't actually go to school. But because schools are such a condensed area of young people. They're just being shut down across the world, which I feel a bit ripped off, mate, to be honest. Like, this never happened when we were at school. Like, we had to go to school for our entire lives pretty much, and like, we didn't get weeks and weeks off because of some virus. So,
mate, there's one positive that came from it. Some Wuhan students, they were all working from home. They were given software to do their homework, which is some app on the App Store. So what they did is they got that app banned from the App Store by spamming it with 1-star ratings. How good is that? No more homework.
Oh, mate, you love to see it.
Well, let's talk about the big headline to do with the big effect of coronavirus, because we're not scientists or epidemiologists and you can do all the research on that yourselves. Well, let's just talk about the effects of the coronavirus.
Yeah, so first headline, store shelves across the whole world are emptying fast, according to Zero Hedge.
Yeah, you can see, like, this post has pictures from all across America, all across Australia, all across the UK of just shelves empty on certain goods. There's even a photo of one of the signs that one of these shops said, where it says, "We've sold out the following items: all brands of toilet paper, water, all different types of water, paper towels, surface wipes, disinfecting wipes, cleanup stuff, hand sanitizer, chicken soup, all canned vegetables, Kraft macaroni and cheese cases, bags of rice, spam." It's pretty interesting stuff there. So looks like some people are really stocking up for trying to have enough food to survive.
Yeah, look, and there are some genuine concerns out there. Like, a lot of countries are locking people down for up to 2 weeks in their homes and basically making it quite hard for them to leave. So it's there are some genuine concerns, but at the same time, I know, it's potentially, particularly here in Australia, there's a lot of delivery stuff now. Like, you can get basically anything you want delivered from the big supermarkets. It doesn't cost you very much. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think if everyone just kept, buying what they normally buy, we probably wouldn't see it. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, Joe.
Or I think fear of panic buying begets panic buying as far as what you hear from there. So, yeah, I think one of the big problems is that in the society that we're in, we're heavily reliant on China for a lot of our medical stuff, for a lot of our produced goods. And when we're experiencing a bit of a supply shock at the moment. And that is something that hasn't happened in a very long time. Now, like back in the last recession, we had a demand shock where there was a drop in demand, but not a drop in supply. Whereas here we've got a drop in supply and a drop in demand all at the same time. Problem is there's like a certain over-reliance on other countries, and when it comes to having a pandemic, that makes it pretty scary. But I mean, you might have heard of this one before, but there was a video of women in an Australian shop brawling over a roll of toilet paper.
Hey, stop! That's enough!
Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes. This one, this is just it's bizarre, it's strange. But basically, a lady had a whole trolley of toilet paper, another lady didn't have any. Words were exchanged. Punches were then exchanged. Store members got involved. All over, rolls of essentially recycled toilet tissue.
So there's plenty of panic and plenty of reason to panic.
Are you feeling panic, Joe? Are you?
I'm pretty terrified, mate. It's there's no hope for us. That's it.
Okay.
End of.
Well, look, we kind of in that light, we've
got voicemail.
We do. Yeah, and it's someone we haven't heard from for a long time. But look, it doesn't surprise me that with everything that's going on, and particularly the topic of tonight's episode, that Citizen X, our erstwhile truth teller, self-proclaimed, has sent us a voicemail with his comments.
Yeah, so our professional skeptic, he left this for us.
Welcome to the O2 messaging service. The person you are calling is unable to take your call. Please leave your message after the tone. To re-record your message, key hash at any time.
Hey, Matt, Joe, man. I just wanted to say, this coronavirus, you need to talk about this. It's a globalist, communist plot for population control and eugenics, man, to kill us all, enslave us with geo-tracking, government apps, control, surveillance. It's an election year, Trump's year, Biden's here, the Fed are going to keep pumping the markets and burn them to the ground as a scorched earth policy. I repeat, coronavirus is a controlled demolition of society. You better stock up on toilet roll because shit's about to get real.
Wow, that guy's full bat whatever coronavirus insane.
Yeah, it's probably worth noting that like we don't endorse anything Citizen X says.
Wait, where is this guy reading his news? That's just stupid.
I don't know. I mean, I for one believe everything I'm told on the news.
Good.
It's news to me.
You have received 1 citizen point.
Yes, always wanted a citizen point.
Mate, let's talk about these world markets. Now, what's been going on in the old global economy?
It's on fire.
Yeah.
The global economy is on fire. It's burning. Someone's poured rapidly cheapening oil onto the world economy and then set the thing alight.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, you look at the 5-year charts for the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial, the FTSE 100 in the UK, the German DAX, the India's Sensex, or the Japan's Nikkei, and honestly, you've just seen that's moving faster than gravity at the moment. There's been a bit of a cut. I mean, headline: the UK and US markets they suffered the worst day since 2008. That was a headline coming out of the Guardian.
Yeah, and like that was the day that things really, really went crazy with the GFC. And this was the worst day since. So 2,000 points were wiped off the Dow. The FTSE had its worst day since 2008. Oil giants were hammered because crude oil fell 30%.
More on that shortly.
I mean, I still struggle looking at these kinds of charts, mate, because having been in watching Bitcoin for the last few years and crypto, like I feel like I'm just so desensitized to like 10, 20% swings. Like no longer does it seem like a huge deal.
Oh, it's so true. You know, there's that GIF of what's this guy's being hung, and there's a guy next to him. He turns around, he's like, "First time." Oh, it's so good.
Yes,
right. That's what the Bitcoiners are like.
Exactly. They're just like, I was born here. Like I was molded by this.
Cut my teeth on that on 10% a day.
Yeah. So to jump into the oil stuff then, because this is really fascinating. So. Russia basically just told the world, how do you say no in Russian, Joe?
Niet.
There's
been some interesting developments there. I'll give you a bit of a background because, it's a really interesting topic. So OPEC, the oil-producing cartel countries that all come together and fix the price of oil, they essentially try and work together to, increase the supply of oil or decrease the supply of oil in order to control the price. Now, three big players are really the US, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. The US will almost never cut their oil production or do what OPEC say, but Russia and Saudi are really the big players. Now, often they work together. So Saudi Arabia wanted to cut in production so that it pushed the prices higher. Saudi, about 40% of their economy relies on oil, whereas Russia's about 10%. But Russia, along with Saudi, they both produce oil very, very cheaply. But to Russia, it's not as big a deal. Saudi asked Russia, can you keep the supply, cut the supply and don't produce so much? And Russia usually go along. This time around, they said no. There's a really interesting piece by Tom Luongo talking about how Russia can ride out these low prices for a long time. And if Russia ride out low prices, that has the potential to destroy the US shale oil market because that's very expensive. They're doing the fracking to get their oil.
Yeah.
So that's and Russia also aren't taking payment for their oil in dollars, US dollars. So they have kind of shielded themselves in a certain way with that, and they have a huge stockpile of gold, and they've suddenly got a huge amount of control over the oil market. Saudi Arabia is now going to be panicking. Russia's probably going to give it a few months or whatever, but they're going to get some concessions out of Saudi Arabia. So there's been this whole geopolitical play here, and by saying no, there was a market massacre. Oil crashed 30%.
Yeah, which it's crazy how well timed it is too. Like the fact that they've kind of waited for this coronavirus thing to reach critical momentum, for people to start getting nervous, and then all of a sudden, bam! They've said no.
And, They've had a lot that's been going on in Turkey as well, like trying to make the Syria deal. That's a whole separate sort of issue, but there's a lot of things happening at once. And yeah, you're right. And for the price of oil to be dropping as, demand for transport is dropping, it's pretty interesting. And yeah, there was a bloodbath in the oil markets that day. Absolute bloodbath. A huge amount of issues happened there, and foreign exchange rates were in free fall. This is a piece coming out of Zero Hedge. Gold spiked above $1,700 for the first time since 2012, which is gold, which is also known to certain Wall Street Journal experts as a pet rock. What happens now? Well, then Morgan Stanley said that to stabilize the markets, the Federal Reserve would need to announce not only a rate cut, but also resume printing money.
So on that, there's a really interesting opinion piece that came out of Mises.org. Now, Ludwig von Mises is like one of the famous founders of Austrian economics. So these guys obviously have a bit of a different angle to a lot of other people in the economic world. But it's a really, really interesting piece where they've basically looked into what the Federal Reserve has done over the last month or so, essentially, as a response to what's been going on.
Yeah, and in their headline, they said, the Fed panicked and its rate cut is making the economy worse.
They said that less than a week ago, several members of the Federal Reserve Board reiterated, rightly so, that cutting rates wouldn't have a significant impact in a supply shock like we've got with the current one. And they said they must also remember that the Federal Reserve already cut rates in 2019 and inflated its balance sheet by 14%, to almost all-time highs in recent months, completely reversing the virtually non-existent prior normalization.
So the Fed actually created a bit more panic in the markets by doing this emergency rate cut, and they caused the opposite effect of what they wanted. Instead of calming the markets, their 50 basis point cut sent a message of panic to market participants.
Yeah, and look, they said that if the jobs and manufacturing figures are better than expected and the economy is solid, what message is the Fed essentially sending by cutting rate points? Like it's essentially its actions are speaking louder than words in a lot of ways, and it tells market participants that the situation is a lot worse than it seems, and the Fed knows a lot more about how dire everything actually is, not only in the United States economy but the global economy.
They were saying, look, the idea that a market crash could be solved with easy monetary policy, instead of understanding the impact of stocks and growth, there's an evident supply shock due to the coronavirus epidemic. But they're saying, look, there's no lack of monetary stimulus in the economy. There's global money supply has soared to $81 trillion, an all-time high, in the middle of the epidemic.
Yeah, and most leading economies have cut rates and implemented zero and negative real rates. I mean, I know here in Australia, they've pulled that lever once already, and there's already kind of people saying, well, that hasn't jump-started the economy enough. Do we pull that lever again? And our interest rates are rapidly plummeting towards zero here, and the banks are being told in no uncertain terms to push the rate cuts on to the consumers.
And the major central banks were already injecting more than $150 billion a month into a doped economy long before the coronavirus was even in the news.
That's a lot of money to print in a month, isn't it? $150 billion worth. The supply shock is a really interesting concept, and they do dig into it a little bit more. They say a supply shock isn't solved with demand-side policies. Governments and central banks will generate a deflationary crisis by adding fuel to bubbles and increasing overcapacity in an already bloated economy, only to create an artificial boost to GDP, something that's not actually grounded in reality.
They ended on cutting rates, printing money, and increasing deficits. It's the wrong response to a viral short-term shock. Furthermore, if these massive demand-side programs are launched aggressively, the result in the medium term will be a new crisis. We already saw it in 2009 with the misguided response of the Eurozone, spending almost 3% of GDP in white elephants and adding debt to a financial credit crunch problem. And that triggered a worse crisis afterwards. And we're going to talk about some of those crises.
It's a great piece, man. That's some really good insight into what's actually kind of going on underneath a lot of this.
Look, and yeah, at the end of the day, the coronavirus might be the match, but we've got a really we've built an economy on some real dodgy sand, and the monetary issues that we've had for over a decade, they're the tinderbox. Coronavirus is the match. They're coming pretty close together.
Yeah, and look, we discussed this about the early signs of what's going on in just only in episode 59. So, geez, like
months ago?
2-3 episodes ago, yeah, and that was on central banks to unleash billions as QE's rebooted. So if you go to about 23 minutes, you'll be able to find that as well.
Yeah,
we
and
discussed that before this happened.
Yeah, because there were some weird overnight rate changes in the markets, and
the repo, they were doing the repo stuff.
So the Federal Reserve just started printing billions to save some issues. So it's just super dodge. We're pumping this sucker up, and let's see what happens. And So Donald Trump put out a really cryptic tweet. Who knows? He said, "Who knows what this means?" But it sounds good to me. He retweeted something from his social media advisor. It's a meme of Donald Trump playing the violin.
Yeah, and it says, "My next piece is called Nothing Can Stop What's Coming." So interpret that how you will.
Yeah.
Hey, FOMO listeners. This is Dan the ICO Man here again, sending out a quick message to you all. I know everyone's panicked about coronavirus. I know everyone is holding up in their homes, building forts out of toilet paper. But look, you got to look through all that. I mean, this is a strong buy signal. Take it from Dan the ICO Man, been in the markets for a long time. I say to you FOMO listeners, you need to be buying and buying hard. This will be when you make your fortune. If you really want to know more, sign up for Dan the ICO Man's newsletter. Not really selling ICOs anymore, but you will make a fortune with Dan, and that's a promise from me, Dan the ICO Man. So there's no way the markets can go down. It's only up from here. Love you all, FOMO listeners. Be talking to you soon. Peace.
Yeah, I was listening to one of the Keiser Report episodes more recently. He put some really interesting analysis. Max Keiser, former Wall Street trader.
So this is the collapse of this empire, which has been going on for near 40 years because of financialization and the magic of a bond market rally. So every single problem the Romans didn't have the ability to simply print their way out of the barbarians invading, because they had to rely on hard money to pay the soldiers, and they were coin clipping and this type of thing. So there was an end game. Here, because of the empire of American debt, they can just print their way for decades without having to face the music. But at some point, if all interest rates go negative, and you've got weaponized children with the coronavirus looking to eviscerate everyone who's a boomer or a male boomer, then that could be, rah-rah for this next generation, who will inherit something like $30 trillion of wealth that's been built up in these affluent bank accounts, including probably $150 billion worth of Bitcoin. So these kids know what they're doing. I try to make friends with these kids. I give them candy, and I give them whatever they want. Don't give me the virus, kid. It's like, this is like Halloween and Christmas and everything wrapped into one. Here, take it all. Just take whatever. Just leave me alone.
Bit eccentric, big Bitcoin guy, but he did really highlight how, this interconnected world is really fragile, and it just shows how dangerous our just-in-time supply model is. He's like, we've got very few stockpiles of things, and there's a double whammy because, there's a drop in supply as well as a demand shock at the same time. And that's really something we haven't seen since the Great Depression. He suggested that things like rationing could be very closely ahead. Things like airdrops of cash have been seen recently in Wuhan and Hong Kong, where the governments give money to all the citizens to try and stimulate spending. But he did end on a really interesting note. He said, look, even if the US markets drop 50%, we're still in a bull market.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Like, it's just a strange perspective, I guess, from him, that because that kind of goes against all rational thought. But yeah, like it was a really interesting piece, interesting perspective from someone who's been in the markets for a long, long time, and who generally does have some interesting takes. Mate, the whole thought of us actually getting to a point where people are stockpiling food and where there's rationing. I mean, we haven't seen rationing since the Second World War, have we?
Yeah, something like that. Sounds about right.
Yeah, it's been a long time, so that'll be something that's really interesting. So, should we be panicking?
Lol. Look, I think we just got to be sensible about what's going on. Like, if this virus is, like, a lot of people are scared of the virus and stuff like that. But look, like, it's highly contagious from what we hear. And it seems like worst comes to worst, you'll get it.
Yep.
And what happens then? You get really bad flu, real dodgy lungs. It's not pleasant, but then most people, like the vast majority of people, like it's only like 3% of people who've actually been diagnosed die. That rate could be between 3 and 5%. So that's 3% of people who've been
and
confirmed.
the vast majority of those are above 65, I'm pretty sure too.
Yeah. The immunodeficient. So there are some members of our society who it really could be quite scary for. When you're 80, 90, it's a lot more serious.
Completely. Look, and if you are in that class, like if it is something that you are immunodeficient or you're more susceptible, that it would be perfectly rational for you to think about
self-isolating, things like that. Yeah, makes sense. So do you think we should be panicking?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think just approach it rationally, look at the situation objectively. I mean, panic doesn't solve anything anyway. That's the reality. I mean, panic is an irrational emotion, and it's
often because we don't have things under control. We don't have as much control, maybe, which is why we panic. And fear is being used to try and get us to react in ways that we shouldn't, and that does concern me a little bit. But I think there are some sensible things we can do, and I think what would be really cool. Let's have a look at what happens during a financial crisis. Because add to this pandemic stuff, supply chain issues, less travel. All this stuff here, quarantines and all that. There's a real concern here for us in Australia because our economy is very heavily reliant on exporting metals to China, and we rely on their demand. So that is kind of the definition of a banana republic. But when things go bad for China, it's bad for us. So there's a real possibility of a financial, blip, maybe slight problem. No need to panic, but I mean, it's worth looking at what happens during a financial crisis. So it might give us some ideas on what can happen in the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and look, like knowing what's going on is a bit of an antidote to panic. Panic is generally people acting irrationally, but if you can stand back and look at things a bit more subjectively, you can size these things up. I mean, people say that there's nothing new under the sun, and that's definitely true with this kind of stuff. So, I mean, what do recessions generally have, Joe? Like, what's some key characteristics of a recession?
Look, I guess one of them is the government wants to stimulate more economic activity, and sometimes that's by taking on more debt in order to, try and stimulate the economy, because that's the silly way that we do things at the moment. So, in order to pay off that debt, they'll want to put taxes up. They want to cut down government services, massive cuts across government. We experienced that in the UK in the last recession. A lot of things are called capital controls, which we'll go into a little bit more.
So there's also generally changes to work too. I mean, generally there's changes, reduced working hours, or a lot of unemployment. I think particularly one big area of concern for people at the moment is the service economy. So with this coronavirus happening, a lot of people aren't going out in public as much. They're trying to avoid gatherings of large people. And here in Australia and all around the world, there are a lot of people employed in hospitality, a lot of people employed in event management, event staffing, and just generally areas that all the way down to like a local gym, for example. I mean, a lot of people are now avoiding going to gyms because that's where people are sweating. That's where a lot of there's like, I hate to say it, but like a lot of body fluid. And I think those areas are going to be impacted a lot, particularly for people who are casual workers. I mean, casual workers don't really have a salary. They just get paid for the hours they work. And if there's no work, they don't get paid.
And when you have, like reduced working hours, it's often because the business that you work for doesn't have as much work for you, but then that also means that there's less money for you, which means there's less money that you have to spend on things, which means just generally there's a drop in demand for things, which then means fewer people want to open new gym memberships, which means gyms could collapse. There's people have to pay mortgages. What happens when people can't meet their repayments? And this happens on a broad scale, but then you do get unemployment, like gradually during a recession. It's not initially, but after a while of things being bad and businesses really struggling, you do get layoffs and unemployment and businesses collapsing.
Yeah, completely. And you see that in the monetary side as well. I mean, typically in these kinds of recessions and financial crises, investor portfolios drop quite sharply.
Yeah, I think if you were in the S&P 500 in the last financial crisis, if you just sat there and just left your money in there, it would have gone down 60% over 2 years, which is a bit of a haircut.
That's over half.
Yeah.
And you also see money flock to safe havens. In the last financial crisis, that was government bonds and gold.
Yeah. And the thing is, safe havens are trickier to find because this whole negative interest rate thing, which we'll cover a little bit later, and it's a bit of this mysterious money magic, but that has the potential to, it's really making it hard to find ways of just making really even small returns. A really interesting example that's really close to my heart is the Greek sovereign debt crisis. That went from 2009 to 2019. So it was after the recession, but it was as a result, it was triggered often as a result, like a knock-on effect of the global financial crisis. This was awful. I mean, essentially, Greece had about 30,000 euros of debt per person. Now, that would generally be okay in most countries, except their GDP per capita was about 23,000 euros per person. So their debt was really high. Their public debt to GDP ratio was the world's highest after Japan and Zimbabwe.
Yeah, and like Japan, I'm pretty sure have like quite a large, like their GDP per capita is quite a lot more significant than that amount too, which is the advantage that Japan has. But the Greek one was really interesting because it was kind of almost like a litmus test for a really serious recession in the modern day.
They had more than 5 years of recession, and it was wild. Yeah. It was because they owed a lot of money, and the European Union there's a whole story behind this, and it's pretty filthy. And personally, this is actually one of the reasons why I really turned to dislike the European Union. But let's just take a look at what happened in Greece during the sovereign debt crisis.
Yep. So first of all, there was we saw major political instability in Greece, and a lot of issues. People were quite obviously upset with their politicians. Politicians were pointing fingers at each other, and there was just a general discontent around the whole political environment. It was of Greece.
So much so that the not extreme left, but this very radical left-wing party actually won in an election, which was completely unthinkable the year before, because there was so much panic that people were like, we need anything to try and get out of this. And they voted for this party that said, look, we're going to just cut off that debt to the EU and just say, now we're not going to pay it. That, long story short, that didn't happen. But they had to make these massive concessions. There were these major budget cuts across the government, massive tax rises. Almost in 2014, so a few years into this, almost half of their national gross domestic product was tax.
Yeah. Which is just insane.
And when taxes go up like that, people really didn't want to have to pay the tax, because the more tax you pay, the less money there is for you.
Yeah, exactly. And all of that led to people essentially panicking and trying to, for example, take their money out of banks to put their money in safe haven areas where it couldn't be taxed, where the government couldn't get at it. But like even early on, there were capital controls implemented by the Greek government. Banks shut for a week leading up to the referendum. Yeah. And there was a cash withdrawal limit of 60 euros a day for Greeks, not foreigners.
Yeah. So what that meant was that just, you could only take out a very small amount. It prevented a run on the bank. So this was the government was ahead of the people on this, and they were just like, people are going to try and run on the banks. Let's limit what they can take out. They blocked international bank transfers, so you couldn't send your money abroad to another country. But then you had retailers, like just the regular shops. They started saying, we only want cash. We don't want to use debit or credit cards, because that meant that they had to then pay tax because it's all digital and it's all measured and the government could access that. They were saying, we're not taking debit or credit cards. We want cash because that's real and tangible.
Yeah, and that in turn meant, of course, that people were trying to get cash, and there were massive lines outside ATMs. Yes. There was money running out in all of those ATMs because the banks were told not to restock them with the cash because they wanted people to adhere to the capital controls. And this whole shadow economy started, essentially. Like, cash became king. If you had cash, you weren't subject to the capital controls that everyone was putting on you. And as a result, people started evading taxes in bigger and bigger droves as more and more people converted back to cash.
Because the thing is, like, when you're really struggling, you don't want to give the government money. You need to sort yourself out. And that's what a lot of people were being very selfish in that way. But you can see why. You know, in 2017, like, this tax evasion rate's rocketed. By 2017, the government actually, like, this is years, almost 6 years into it. I can't remember. Yeah, like a number of years into this, the government were just seeing there was so much money being evaded on the tax. They forced businesses to install point of sale to accept credit or debit cards, and they gave €1,500 fines for failure to install debit or credit card things.
Wow.
And that's so they could get more tax, more collections, stuff like that. They even gave tax deductions to people when they paid electronically. They did all of these measures just try and take this money to pay off this government debt. Crazy.
Yeah, it was unreal. And the big issue with this, of course, was that the reason people were wanting to evade tax so much is because they didn't actually feel like it was their problem. They felt like it was the problem of the government for letting this happen, letting Greece get so far in debt and borrowing very, very irresponsibly, and then basically capitulating to the European Union. And, you know, essentially because they made their views clear. They wanted to install a government that was going to say, no, we're not paying. The people didn't take out these massive loans. It was the government, the politicians.
Poor management, poor planning.
Exactly, yeah. So their view, which I think everyone is quite empathetic with, was that it wasn't actually their problem.
Yeah.
It was the problem of the officials that were in government.
Like, if you're a barber, like, imagine that. You're just like, look, it's not my problem. Why do you want me to pay for your stupid mistakes?
Exactly, yeah. And a lot of them were just saying, well, you know, just do away with it. Like, we don't need it. Let's just clean house and you know, write all the debt off and we'll start again and we'll keep going on because Greece isn't a country with a lot of large value savings. A lot of the value in Greece, the people with a lot of money are foreigners, and they felt quite rightfully, I think, that they shouldn't really be paying back that debt.
Yeah,
but look, at the end of the day,
right, yeah.
Completely, yeah, and they had value taken out of their bank accounts, which was, you know, up until that time they thought that their money was theirs. And it turned out that their money wasn't theirs if they didn't hold it in cash.
The old switcheroo, hey.
Yeah, it was a really interesting one to watch, but it had some pretty big consequences for Greece.
Yeah, throughout this whole thing, their gross domestic product, so the total value of all the goods and services they produce as a country, that dropped 25%. That's like massive. And for a country with loads of people, like hundreds of thousands of companies went bankrupt. In 2011 alone, there were 111,000 bankruptcies, which was a 30% jump on the previous year. But even then, that means that there were, 80, 90,000 in, I'm not good at maths, but in 2010. There's a lot of bankruptcies. This thing caused havoc there.
Yeah, and 25% of the population ended up jobless. There was 55% youth unemployment.
Really tough for young people, yeah.
Yeah. Homelessness went up. Poverty went up. Some stats that said 44% of Greeks were below the poverty line in 2014, which is actually when I visited Greece.
Wow.
I knew things were bad, but even when I was there, I didn't realize things were that bad.
Hunger was a huge issue there, and the thing is, usually we'd look at other nations that aren't necessarily first world countries, and you'd say, you could you pity the hunger, and you have a rock concert every 10 years and think, let's think about these people who are hungry. But this is an issue in Greece, which is poorly managed economy, but this really hurt the everyday person. And the thing is, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Let's just look over just nearby to a country right nearby, Cyprus.
Yeah, Cyprus is a really interesting one. So Cyprus had a financial crisis in 2012, 2013, and saw some pretty crazy stuff go on. So commercial property values dipped pretty quickly by about 30% when the crisis started. Yeah,
we won't talk about like a lot of the history of this, but one of the big things to focus on in the Cypriot financial crisis was the bail-in of some of the major banks. Now, this is a bail-in. It's attempted robbery. They take money off the people who have money in the bank. Now, like most banks, you probably have a bank account where your government insures a certain amount of the deposit. Like, so in Europe, if you're a European citizen, I think it's 100,000 euros that you get insured. Yep. But let's say that you are from another country, like, say, Russia, and Cyprus is quite close by and they have good interest rates in their bank accounts. You're not insured like the Europeans.
Yeah, and look, and that's they were basically saying that they were going to take 7% of the deposits up to $100,000 euro, and 10% for anything higher.
So they were just taking the money out of people's accounts.
Basically, they were just saying, there's money in that account, we're taking it.
Yep.
There's money in that account, we're taking it. Nothing you can do. We need to protect the banks.
And as part of these massive protests there was because they wanted to take that off the people. They wanted to take 7% of all deposits. They wanted to take 10% of anything higher. But then there were massive protests and the government were like, oh, no, we won't do that. So instead, the government shut down the second largest bank. They took all uninsured deposits, so that's billions, from basically anyone who had an account value above 100,000 euros. Past that 100,000 euros, gone, taken. Yeah, and another major bank, they kept open, but they took anything above 100,000 euros, gone.
So they literally just stole the money. The government said, look, we need to bail the banks in, we need to pay our debts. We're just going to take money.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really interesting one because Greece had kind of brought it home a little bit, but this was the real moment when people, like, looking from inside and also looking from outside, looked at it and went, hang on a second. So what this basically means is that money in the bank isn't actually my money. Like, the moment I put money in a bank, it's the bank's money, it's the government's money, it's not my money. And I only had, I essentially just have the privilege to remove that until that privilege is revoked.
Yeah.
And a lot of people got into Bitcoin because of this one in particular, because they were like, well, if government money isn't self-sovereign, like if I don't have ultimate control over like large amounts of money, then I need to find something that I do have ultimate control over.
Yeah, and it's scary. I mean, they did offer some, like, if you had more than $3 million in the bank and you're a foreigner, they were going to offer a pretty quick citizenship by investment program in order to give the people the benefits of 100,000 euros saved. Yeah,
it's like being mugged on the street by someone and then told that you can come and clean their dishes for them.
Mate, you would not have wanted to retire to Cyprus. I tell you that for free. But pretty scary stuff. Argentina. Let's look at Argentina. Argentina is like a country in perma-crisis. Like perma-crisis. I don't even know the full history of this, but let's just take a real specific look at 2001 to 2.
Yeah, so in 2001 to 2, Argentina had a pretty big financial crisis. There were riots, supermarkets were looted all over the place, and people who were quite angry and depositors in the banks vandalized a whole bunch of banking ATMs.
Yeah, and I mean, they're in a perma-crisis. Even just late last year, September 2019, Reuters put a headline out, Argentines wait at banks to withdraw cash as currency controls kick in. There you go again. They just restrict what you can take out.
Which is weird because, like, you look at Argentina from like the earlier periods and they were doing pretty well. Like, there was some good stuff going on in Argentina. But then it's almost like the attitude shifted and the government's approach to things shifted, and yet now they just can't seem to pull themselves out, and they keep making the same mistakes, again and again and again. So, and
the thing is, you won't get much, like, you don't get advance warning that you can get money out of the bank because banks will want to protect themselves, so it will only be too late by the time you find out that is bad. That's the problem. So only if you'd taken out money before those banks shut down for a week would you have been able to be safe in the Greek crisis, for example. In Argentina, it's, if you're waiting at an ATM, it's too late.
Yeah.
Which is kind of scary.
Just like if you're trying to find toilet paper now, it's too late.
It's true. And a lot of listeners are like, this is Greece, this is Argentina. You might be saying, oh, this is Cyprus. These are all these crazy economies. They're not first world countries. But look, if you think this stuff can't happen in your country, like, it might, like, it's worth seriously asking yourself, like, is there a chance you're wrong? Now, it's not certain that we're going to fail. Like, it's not certain. Like, yeah, some doomsayers like, oh, we're going to go to zero. We're going to, you know, be completely collapsed and everyone's going to be on the street and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you know, people want to, and they like make cups of tea and buy McDonald's and things like that. But it's definitely likely that you can have financial problems.
Yes. Yeah, completely. And I mean, no one's immune from this kind of stuff. It starts going wrong. And there's an article we've spooked a few times on the podcast, which was done a few years ago, called Australia's Economy is a House of Cards, by Matt Barry, it was. And he went through a lot of this stuff. And I think he was probably a little bit off in his timing projections, just like a lot of people are, like, have been off. You know, I mean, there's a few people I follow that have been calling this kind of thing happening for a few years. And it's been delayed, but it's a really interesting one to go and look, because he paints a picture of how reliant Australia in particular is on just a few factors. Like, most countries have a number of different ways that they generate GDP, that they make money, that they, you know, keep the economy ticking over. But Australia is very, very reliant on China. And very, very reliant on a couple of industries. And
if you're not from Australia, if you're one of our delightful US listeners or our single user from Iraq, look, welcome to the show. But also that piece, Australia's Economy is a House of Cards, really worth looking, because if you want to see this is things are crazy, have a read of that piece. But one thing that is really interesting to me is that, yeah, there's been more cash, is like printing money, which is like cheating in Monopoly. Yeah, that is something that was completely theoretical, and then they just started doing it, printing money, and it's wild, absolutely wild. There's so much printed money in the market. I mean, I think it's Japan own like 10% of Japanese businesses, which is nuts. But there's a lot of financial problems in there. You know, they've put interest rates down and put them down to try and stimulate things. But it's only a couple moves away. Their interest rates are going to be at zero. What happens next?
Well, once they go to zero, like if things still aren't working, particularly if they're using a Keynesian model, which we won't go into on this podcast, because that deserves an episode in and of itself. The only other way they can go is into negative. I mean, you can't if things are bad and you're reducing interest rates to try and make them less bad, but things are still bad. Well, raising them will make things more bad again. Generally, it'll actually make it worse than how bad they were when the rates were there. So you've just got to go into negative interest rates, which until about 10 years ago wasn't even really a thing that existed.
Yeah. It was just, we ran out of options to try and, like, all of our policy options gone. Negative interest rates were the way that they're looking at it. Now, if you think this can't happen, have a look at Japan, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, the European Central Bank, which is going to pass through to the whole of the EU. This is something that the central banks have been very serious about, essentially negative interest rates. If you have money in the bank account, they take money off you for the privilege of keeping your money in the bank. It tries to encourage you to spend money, and they'll still take money from your account. It's like having a fee for a bank account. But if you borrow money, inversely, the theory goes, you would be paid to borrow money. So you take out a $100 loan, and they give you $1 extra.
Yeah.
So you get paid to be in debt,
which is just which just makes no sense. But that's kind of where we're at now. We're at peak Keynesian economy essentially. Like that's where we're at. Like we're kind of in uncharted territory now, and things have kind of been compressing, and we've almost. I mean, if you've ever seen those like stock graphs, you know how like you have a big swing and then a smaller swing and a smaller swing and a smaller swing. And eventually reaches like a triangle, you know, where it gets really compressed. Oh, yeah. That's kind of like, I feel like that's where we're at with the global economy and the way that we've been handling it for the last 100 years since money printing started. And, you know, it's not going to end well. Yeah. That's really the only thing that you can say.
And now this is like, negative interest rates are, in our opinion, total lunacy. Like, it's crazy talk. But, you know, that's the situation we're in. That's the economy we're in. We didn't decide on that. But if there's money in your bank account, just ones and like digits on a screen, it's very easy for a bank to actually put negative interest rates in and say, look, this $100 is now worth 99. We'll take that. But if you have $100 in cash, they can't take that extra $1 off you and make that $100 worth less. Or you'd think. So the IMF put published a really interesting paper back in 2019. They've been thinking about loads of ways of cracking down on cash or taxing cash, which was published last year. And look, in my opinion, these guys are outright thieves. There's no other way to say it. They're plotting ways to take money off regular people like you and me at scale. And this is like the IMF have published this.
Yeah. The International Monetary Fund. And yeah, I think we shared this last year sometime. And at the time, governments were saying, we've got no plan for negative interest rates. We've got no plan to ban cash. There's not going to be a war on cash. But then the IMF guidance paints a very, very different story. And the guidance is to all the countries which take their cues from the IMF. I mean, there's no one more senior from a monetary policy advisory level in the world at the moment than the IMF. Now, they bury the wording in language that, makes it you kind of think it's all right if you read the report that we've linked. And there's an example in a speech given by one of them. And the speech was called "The Case for Unencumbering Interest Rate Policy at the Zero Lower Bound."
Which, it's so stupid, that name. It's like the case for unencumbering interest. Unencumbering, like what the F? They're saying how to take money from depositors. It's just wild. Like, you see what I mean? Like, it's the language, and who cares? It's so boring that even a journalist will fall asleep. So it's just wild. But let's look in this IMF paper on ways of cracking down on cash and taxing cash. There are a few different methods that they discuss that, could be interesting ways of getting rid of cash. Let's go through some of them.
Cool. So the first one is a periodic requirement for stamps on cash, essentially meaning that you pay. So this is to discourage paper cash storage.
So you'd have to go to the post office or something, once a year with your notes or whatever, and you need a specific coloured stamp on it. And
please, sir, will you stamp my money to make sure that it still holds some value?
Yeah. And look, here's what the IMF said. They said, look, despite widespread awareness of this idea, thanks to this interesting idea that John Maynard Keynes discussed in a book.
Oh, praise be. Love some Keynes.
Putting stamps on cash, as a tax and charging for the stamps, it's not being implemented at a national level. We suspect it's probably because it's politically difficult, because it requires, an inconvenient, highly salient bureaucratic machinery to implement. And look, because it looks quite obviously like a tax. So what they're saying is we need to put negative interest rates in without it looking like negative interest rates.
Yeah. Like it needs to look like a good thing. They've also talked about devaluing cash. So the depreciation mechanism for paper currency, basically meaning that, for example, they could say that, okay, from July 1 this year, physical cash is worth 90% of electronic cash. So for every $10 that you have in physical cash, it's actually worth $9. But if you have $10 in the bank, it'll still be worth $10.
Which is pretty wild.
That's a recommendation from the IMF.
Yeah, it's an option. It's an option there, Next one is serial number lottery. This is crazy. They said, in which each year the Federal Reserve could pick a number between 0 and 9 out of a hat, and all bills with a serial number ending in that number would no longer be legal tender. A clever way to achieve a negative 10% PCIR.
Wow. Okay. And they also talk about the a tax approach. So they say that you should consider engineering an increasing path of consumption taxes, a decreasing path of labour taxes, and a temporary investment tax credit.
So essentially, more tax on stuff you buy, because that would push up the prices for the goods, and lower income tax. So essentially, that would just mean you get less personal income tax, but the prices of goods are going up. So it sort of means that the government win either way. It's quite there's some smarts behind it to do with some investment taxes as well. I think tax reductions, but it's one wild way of basically taking money out of the economy without really people realizing it, using tax.
Yeah. These hidden taxes. They've said that a difficulty for that approach would be the tools that are not directly under the control of the central bank, and they've suggested that you kind of need to politicize those tools. So, yeah, there's some interesting terminology going on in here.
Yeah, and they're just saying, look, you can't, tax government putting in taxes unpopular; they won't get voted in, so it's not as easier for us to do.
Yeah, you gotta kind of maybe sell the narrative that it's for the nation or to help us stop a recession or something.
Did that previous one, serial number lottery, did that not sound crazy to you? Imagine you had 10 banknotes and they're just like, oh, cool, one of those banknotes is suddenly no longer legal. And you just had $100 bill that was sitting there and then it's just not worth anything.
Something's worth nothing.
So weird.
Oh, mate, look, the thing about all this is that and it's so funny that it's coming from a fund literally called the International Monetary Fund, because what it does is it actually like destroys the value of the money. Like it makes the money, it degrades the foundation on which that money sits. And you've only got to look at history many, 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 many times. I mean, the Roman Empire is a perfect example. Once the currency started getting debased, people gradually lost faith in the currency, and the empire ended up going bust. You know, they just couldn't. Their money was just not worth anything anymore. And
toilet roll could
happened.
be, you know, as Nikolai said in our Telegram group, you know, there's just toilet roll. That could be our currency.
Well, I mean, the thing about money is it's crystallized time. You know, like it's essentially something that you exchange with someone else to represent value. And the more you degrade that value, the less confident people are in exchanging that, using that unit of exchange, essentially. So, I mean, what they're outlining here is a destruction of faith in national currencies, essentially.
Yeah. And they're saying, look, there's nothing that people can do about it. It's just like, will they control what the money that you personally own is worth? And that's scary for some people. You know, it's just like for everyone. If you're rational, that's scary. Like, it doesn't matter how much you trust them. If your money they say is suddenly worth less, that's not right.
They've got a few other options in here too as well. They talk about charging deposit fees for cash. So if you want to put your money in the bank, you have to pay a fee to deposit it. Having withdrawal limits. You know, there's your Greece and Cyprus alarms going off. Deposit limits. Charging banks a yearly rental fee for each banknote. So you've actually got to rent the money from the central bank.
And they've talked about, you know, central bank digital currencies. So, you know, having here's a crypto that's the Reserve Bank of Australia crypto.
Look, it just seems like the whole goal is, and they've even said this is one of their stated objectives, is to move people towards eliminating cash.
Yeah, and they've noted it is tricky. Like they look at in India. We talked about that. I can't remember which episode, but India took out one of the banknotes, one of the higher denomination banknotes from circulation. That was a major problem. Someone was just paid in all these notes, and then suddenly that is worth nothing, and you've just done all this work worth nothing. So they're suggesting, you know, having a ceiling on the amount that a business can hold in cash. So saying, look, no business can store paper cash, or, you know, for more than a week, or no business can store more than $5,000 in cash. You know, things like that. That's what they're talking about. Or retiring, you know, big notes, big bills.
Yeah. So it's harder for you to carry cash around and store as much value in notes. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, the only thing that I think, since they're taking such inspiration from John Maynard Keynes, I mean, where's the appealing to the animal spirits? That's something that, you know, he'd be a big fan of. So,
right, yeah.
Economist jokes. Sorry.
Mate.
Sorry.
Do you know what? There's even some conjecture that they're gonna put expiry dates on banknotes.
Yeah,
well, that's from me at least.
Imagine that. I mean, that's essentially that your money is just becoming a gift card, isn't it?
Yeah, and
isn't that annoying when your gift card expires and like you're like, this is still worth, like, why does this need to expire? I mean, you know,
it's the old time pressure thing. And that's the thing, is it's boiling the frogs. They're going to do it real slowly. Nothing's going to happen overnight. It's not going to be suddenly no cash for you. It's going to be very slowly, real tiny little things at first. Look, in Australia, we talked about it late last year, law that came in saying, look, all cash transactions over $10,000 are illegal.
Yeah.
So suddenly you want to buy a car with cash, your card better be worth $9,999.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is the government can actually drop that $10,000 to $5,000 without parliamentary approval.
Yes. Yeah, there's already limits built. There's already discretion built into those bills. So, yeah, look, it's a case of gradually, but we are seeing it happen. And you know, I dare say if there is some serious recession action happening, you just watch it get politicized. You know, you just watch them say that this is for the good of the good to the country, good to the economy. Yeah. A lot of doom and gloom, but I think it's probably good for us to talk about some peace of mind during a panic as well.
Yeah, this is really, really important. Now, we'll cover the food side of things last because that's really interesting on the peace of mind during a panic stuff. But just things on work. Okay, so let's say businesses start going down or work becomes hard, and you get it's worth before there's a problem. Keep if you're someone who's in tech, keep building your skills. If you're thinking about it, take some online courses, build some more skills. The worst that it can't harm you to be have a few more things at your disposal that you can do. That's that skill building is one of the big things.
Yeah, basically making yourself more valuable. So if there are issues, your employability goes up, your ability to earn a living. You can draw that from different sources, and start networking too. It's probably a good time to start, meeting people from different areas. Just kind of getting to know more people, because you never know where opportunities will come from if things start drying up.
Yeah, and that's really important for anyone who's a freelancer will know this. If often you'll do some networking because you need some business, and then you'll get business and you'll stop networking. But then all of a sudden, what happened? Often you get word of mouth stuff, so you keep getting businesses in. But if you're not networking and all of a sudden the business slows a little bit, you're in a problem. But if you're still keep that networking going, it really can save you during a problem.
Yep. Yeah, completely. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about finance, and that is definitely a big thing to think about. So we're not saying that all this stuff is going to happen, but nothing's new under the sun.
To do?
Yeah, so have an emergency fund, just like you'd have emergency food if you're worried about food running out. Have an emergency stash of money just in case money runs out. I mean, there's no runs on ATMs at the moment. So it's worth considering maybe carrying a bit more cash than you normally would.
Yeah, or even if you are just relying on your bank account, having a month's worth of expenses, it doesn't just happen overnight. But over the next few months, if you can just put an extra little bit aside in a separate account, just until you got a lot of our listeners probably do already have savings in an account sitting there just in case. But, nothing worse than hitting a disaster, your engine blows on your car. And up to a lot of people, that's a real panic. But, if you got those sitting there, that is better,
Completely. Yeah, just even if it's 10%, start putting 10% into another account to see if you've got it there. Have some funds available for investing. I mean, you read any book from anyone who's made a lot of money investing, most of the time they will say that they made most of their money when everyone else was scared. Rich Dad Poor Dad is the perfect example of a book that, everyone knows it, but you hear him talk and he's like, look, when everyone else didn't want to buy, I bought. And that's, he made sure he had some money around for when everyone else was kind of scared, and turned that into a lot more. You've been waiting years for a recession, mate. Right. You've got a fund ready to go.
I want to get some deals. That's the main one. And thing is, there's only a few times in a decade when there are good days. After an election, after Brexit, things like that. Good opportunities, and I want to be ready when there's a low point. So that's something I'm pretty excited about. But look, if investing isn't your thing, then don't bother with that. But having emergency money is a good idea.
Yeah. Another thing that's going on is people are talking about airdropping money. Governments are talking about airdropping money.
Yeah, it's happening in Hong Kong and Wuhan. They just give people money to try and stimulate things.
Yeah, so I mean,
what would you do with yours if you got given $1,000 from the government? What would you do?
I'd put it into Bitcoin.
Oh, nice.
I'd just put it straight into Bitcoin.
Nice.
Because that's money that will hold its value. Yes, it goes up and down, but on a long term trend, it goes up. I might stick a bit of it in something else, in gold or something. But I'd put that money somewhere. I'd turn it into an asset which is going to store value better over the long term, considering everything we've been talking about.
That is smart. It's smart. I like it. I like it. Look, if interest rates do continue to drop, refinancing your mortgage and your car debt, so if you can, refinancing stuff can be smart. Yeah, you make hay while the sun is shining.
Completely. Yeah. You just want to really just want to be as flexible as you possibly can. You want to leave your options open. When you see people get really caught in these panic recession type events, it's when they haven't left themselves contingencies. It's when they haven't left themselves options, and it's worth just sitting down for a few hours and thinking about, just assuming that things may be going wrong for the next year and thinking about how you may handle that and what you'd like to have on hand if in 6 months' time there's some stuff that's seriously going wrong, and just write it down, and work from that. And it may take you 3 months to get there, but you'll have that peace of mind. If it doesn't happen, well, that's fine. But if it does happen, you'll know that you'll be able to weather that storm better than a lot of other people.
It's for some of the wealthy listeners of this show, good to have you here. That's really cool that you got loads of cash, but don't keep more in the bank than what the government can insure. And you probably know that already, but for example, in Greece, they were saying like 100,000 euros is the max we insure. It's probably not worth keeping more in the bank than that. And even then, the government will, governments have broken their promises on what they will insure, deposit-wise.
Yep. Yeah. If they're feeling the pinch, and they're struggling to pay debts, the first thing that will go is their insurance that they've said. But yeah, I mean, in Australia, I think it's 250 grand that the government insures accountants up to. But yeah, look, I would not be as confident that would continue if things go wrong. Also like diversifying. I think looking at finding safe havens for things to put your money into.
They are getting harder to find, but there are, for example, during recession, there are some businesses that thrive. I mean, look at Domino's during the previous recession in the UK. They just thrived because people couldn't go to restaurants. They're ordering pizza. So looking at what
Maggi, people are probably buying more noodles as well.
Look, that's if you can do options trading on Maggi, you'd be making some money. Yeah.
I mean, if you've got Kleenex shares right now, you're laughing.
Oh, good decision.
They're buying more and more toilet paper printing machines as we speak.
Probably buying them off the central bank. Yeah,
that's right. That's worth as much, isn't it?
Yeah. I do worry whether if they're capital controls, as they call it, come in, whether they're going to say, oh, look, suddenly you can't buy cryptocurrency, because it would be quite easy to do in law, and they could say to all the banks, you're not allowed to send any money to crypto exchanges or whatever. Yeah. So, before, it's sort of like being in Greece before they put the limit on ATMs and taking cash out. Yeah. I personally, keep consistently buying, Bitcoin. I'm using Amber.io. We did a great episode with Alex Fetsky on that. Check out Amber, the app. If you're in Australia, it's awesome. It just weekly, it just have a recurring Bitcoin purchase. Don't even think about it. Other cryptocurrencies like Monero as well. Having a bit of cash, maybe, as long as if you need it. Some people are getting physical gold as well.
Yeah. And gold is trending up, and it's been a good store of value throughout human history. So it's definitely something to look at as well. Yeah. But yeah, like it's just all about keeping your options open. It's just about hedging. It's very, very good to be hedging against things like this happening. There was a great piece you found, Joe, on panic buying versus stockpiling.
Yeah, really interesting. This is an Australian blog run by Kath Armstrong. Kath is a massive proponent of just having plenty of stuff there and having plenty of groceries in her cupboard. And let's just read through this piece because I think it's really interesting.
So she says that my favourite investment is my grocery stockpile. I have a stockpile of groceries that we've been happily living off since January and will continue to live off it for at least another 9 months. Our pantry is worth twice what I paid for it, and it's saving us money this year. A great return on investment, far better than anything the banks or stock exchange are offering at the moment.
And she says, look, there have always been gloom and doomers, like us on the FOMO show, predicting the end. Remember Y2K, bird flu, swine flu, out of control meteors, drought, flood, tsunamis, and now we have COVID-19, and people are panicking.
Yeah, they're going crazy clearing shelves of toilet paper, hand sanitizer, UHT milk, baby formula, nappies, pasta, and oats.
And look, she says, I'll fess up and I'll say, look, oats made me smile. Don't get me wrong. I have oats in the pantry and I use them. But I just wondered how many people who are going crazy buying bulk oats know any way other than porridge to use them.
She's right. And she says, I've watched some of the TV shows about doomsday preppers, ordinary people stockpiling food, seed, medicines, and even ammunition. So they'll be ready for the end of the world or a future economic collapse or apocalypse.
So do I line up with these extremists, she says? Not at all. I find it entertaining, but certainly not realistic or practical.
She says, our pantry stockpile is built to a plan. I know how much of each thing we need to meet our needs for the year. I keep an eye on prices to make sure I pay the lowest possible price. I keep the best before and use by dates in mind and buy accordingly.
And look, she says, look, the other extreme is not to be prepared at all. However, which is also unacceptable. To me, building a reasonable stockpile of food, toiletries and cleaning supplies for my family is responsible. It's insurance, and for us, this year it has paid off.
She says, to me, food and household supplies in reasonable amounts are just as much insurance as our emergency fund savings and the insurance policies that cover household disasters. These things give me peace of mind and assurance that I will be able to care for my family and our home no matter what life throws our way. As I said, we face long-term unemployment, chronic illness, and now a pandemic.
She says, my pantry stockpile may seem extreme. So what is a reasonable pantry stockpile? Look, think about how you get paid. If you get paid weekly, plan to always have at least a week's supply of groceries, toiletries, cleaning supplies, medicines on hand. If you get paid fortnightly, try to always be a fortnight ahead, ditto for monthly. This then gives you wiggle room if things go pear-shaped.
Done reasonably, emergency preparedness in whatever form it takes, grocery stockpile, emergency fund in the bank, insurance policies is not wacky. The peace of mind that comes from knowing that you're prepared really is priceless, and it's something everyone can enjoy. And I intend to do everything in my power to encourage you to follow my lead. I just want to just mention on that, mate. Like I can personally attest to that. Like when all this stuff started kicking off, like at the start of the year, I went out and basically did this. Like I bought probably maybe 3 months worth of food that I could just sit in the shed, just because I didn't want to have to worry about it. Like if things actually got bad, I just wanted to know that we had everything we needed, and we wouldn't have to worry about going out and paying crazy prices or braving crowds or dealing with crazy people. That we could just keep going on with our lives, relatively uninterrupted, and we'd have what we need. And like for me, with our family, like that gave me a lot of peace.
And yeah, just like the fact that you did that before prices for these things started going up, because that's all the demand pushes the prices up. Yeah, that's better than getting a tax cut. Like honestly, that is, and that's why she's saying that pantry saves her so much money. But yeah, like some of our listeners probably don't have a massive pantry and don't have plenty of food in there. So it seems like having a year's worth of food or all of that, it seems crazy. So how do you do it? Actually, a really interesting piece that Kath wrote separately on building up a stockpile. She said, look, start off with adding 1 or 2 extra basics to your list next time you shop. Might be an extra packet of pasta or sugar or another box of cereal. Continue in this way until you have your stockpile. Aim to have a stockpile that will let you skip grocery shopping for a week. Then aim for a fortnight, a month, and build up to 3 months. That's smart. If there's a bushfire, if there are things like that, and especially if you're in a remote country like Australia where you can live out in the middle of nowhere, these things are actually they're not stupid. They're actually sensible.
Yeah, and our supply chain, particularly in Australia, is quite vulnerable. Like we produce a fair amount of things here, but a lot of it comes from overseas. And you think about it, like what's the first thing if things are getting tough? What's probably one of the first things to go? It's the long haul shipping deliveries to places like Australia and New Zealand and the Pacific Islands and places that are a bit harder to get to. Whereas if you're on a mainland somewhere, whether you're in Europe or the Americas or China, like you've always got the overland routes, and it's just probably a bit easier to get things. So particularly for people like us living on an island, not silly at all, and I guess the way that she's done it, like you also avoid the whole like looking like you're stocking up with a stupid amount of stuff. If you're just buying little bits of extra each time.
And it doesn't put so much pressure on running out of things, because if everyone's out there going and buying 3 months worth of food, we're going to have shortages, and that is happening. But, just getting a couple extras every time, so sensible. You're right, 100%.
Yeah.
How can we get privacy and security for peace of mind? A couple of little sort of smaller tips. What are some things we think about?
Yeah, so for privacy, keep information for yourself. Like, don't tell people that you've got a massive stockpile like I've been doing. But it's okay. Like, I trust you listeners. But it's also, it's best not to publicize where you live too. Or particularly if you just bought a massive stockpile of toilet paper and now gouging your neighbors.
And that goes especially for your social media. Best to double check your location settings on your posts and on your camera on your phone. Because if you take a photo and stick it on Instagram of your massive toilet roll stock, and your location can be traceable through means like that. Now, Instagram may have cut down on this, but it's still possible to find exactly what your location was when you took that photo. So,
yeah. Yeah, and physical security too. So in line with that, physical security is your line of defense before the police. Particularly, if a lot of stuff's going on, they may never come. So locks on the doors, cameras around your property, and secure your crypto as well. That's a big one.
Mm-hmm. So whether it's getting a hardware wallet if you have a significant amount of crypto, splitting up your keys, storing your keys in separate different locations. So you write it down, cut it into 3, and then put those in 3 different places. Or 5 or 10 or 20 different places. Splitting it up so it's harder for people to get that, because crypto is pretty easy to get.
Yeah, and look, on that, I think one other thing that's worth saying too is think about the security of your transactions as well, because if the worst thing does happen and the government start banning crypto or trying to recoup those purchases back from people who hold it, it's really important for you to have that not to be traceable to you, because then you don't have to worry about that. You can just keep a hold of your crypto without having to worry about someone confiscating it. So look into, if you're a Bitcoin fan, look into something like CoinJoin, for example, which is basically like a feature which everyone kind of puts in their Bitcoin. It mixes all the address up. It ends up in your wallet still, but it's very hard to trace the point of purchase to your actual wallet, which is just a nice little extra bit of security. There's a wallet called I think it's called Samurai Wallet. They're building that in, and another one called Wasabi Wallet. They're also building that in. So there are a couple to check out. Just if you want to kind of have a little bit more peace of mind about not just governments, but anyone knowing that you purchase Bitcoin, particularly if you've got a decent amount of holdings, you just want to keep that as anonymous as possible if that stuff starts becoming really valuable.
And worth looking at things like Monero as well. Privacy coins, private by default, as much as we know. Yeah, and on top of all that, just making sure you've got good insurance policies. The last thing you need right now is you drive your car. Please drive safely. Anyone who's listening to this, you're driving along, suddenly you get hit by another car, but some things can go wrong, and you need to make sure you got insurance in place, things like that.
Speaking of insurance, Lloyds of London has, in a bit of good news, has doubled down on Bitcoin wallet insurance.
Yeah.
So so Lloyds of London are like a massive worldwide insurance firm based in London. They're getting into crypto in a big way. So they've already insured cold wallets, where coins are kept offline in secure vaults. But now they're looking towards what they call hot wallets. So hot wallets are like internet connected wallets that hold cryptocurrency.
Now this is attracting Lloyds because a lot of the cryptocurrency exchanges keep their active money in these hot wallets that's moving around on exchanges. And Lloyds actually, they're joining forces with crypto-centric insurer CoinCover. They're aiming to extend liability insurance to cryptocurrency wallets held online, as reported by The Times the other day. The enterprise is designed as a flexible insurance policy, coordinating with the ebb and flow of a volatile market to combat against rising crypto theft.
This isn't Lloyd's first foray into crypto insurance. In 2018, they insured the crypto custodial platform Kingdom Trust. However, unlike the new underwriting, Lloyds insured the firm's custody cold wallets, a significantly less risky undertaking. Despite the recent uptick in crypto hacks, attacks, all sorts of other malicious acts, they see an opportunity.
They're saying like there's growing demand for insurance that can protect cryptocurrency as it becomes increasingly popular.
Oh, it's a big deal for exchanges. It really is. I mean, that is probably the number one fear for any exchange, Bitcoin, crypto app, is what happens if I get hacked and I lose all the custodial money that I've been holding. And there's all sorts of strategies people employ to deal with it, but actually having someone underwriting that, able to replace the value, big deal. So,
and that means that Lloyds, they're not just paying you if your money gets stolen. They're actually getting involved in the security aspect of things. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they'll they have they'll have like a set of guidelines that they're putting together. I think they've already mentioned that in the article, and they'll essentially, like, to get insurance from someone like Lloyds, something like this. I can guarantee you they're going to have some pretty strict procedures you'll need in place. It may be something like an ISO 27001,
right?
Like some to have some baseline compliance standards. Some baseline mechanisms in place so they know that you're doing the requisite amount to protect it. And the chance that they're going to have to pay out is, as unlikely as possible.
So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in the past, lots of insurance companies, they've sort of not bothered with the crypto wallet protection for exchanges, and ensuring that. But for the most part, they've been turned off by big headlines of big crypto hacks on exchanges. But look, the billions of dollars in the crypto market, they're too tempting to avoid forever. That's how it ends.
Yeah, and I think it's bullish for the crypto market in general too. Like, I think it just means that they see the value in it continuing, they see it growing, and they want to play in the space. So it's great. It's great news. It's really positive.
Next piece of good news, a new Google Chrome extension actually gives access to uncensorable websites.
Yeah, so this is out of decrypt.co, and it's a Tim Draper backed effort, and they've announced the launch of a Google Chrome extension that allows users to browse uncensorable websites built on Ethereum.
Yeah, so the extension will allow Chrome browsers to access websites like Draper's own timdraper.crypto and Anthony Pompliano's off-the-chain.crypto.
And so they've said, the co-founder of the company, Unstoppable Domains, has said, most people use Chrome. We want the decentralized webs to be just as easy to use as the traditional web, and this means that you need as many opportunities and as many tools as possible to search the decentralized web.
Yeah, so according to the company, its decentralized domains are not stored by a custodian, so no company, government, or other group can shut down a website unless they own it. Another feature is that a domain can be used as a payment gateway, meaning that these human-readable addresses can be used to send and receive crypto all over the world. It's yes, and if that's not enough, once you buy a domain, you own it forever, meaning that you won't have to keep repaying external hosts who charge domain users once a year.
Oh, that sounds amazing. We need to get on this. This sounds great.
FOMO.crypto.
Yes. They've said that other use cases for their products, according to the firm, include accessing decentralized crypto exchanges and crypto-focused content producers using their blockchain domain to store and distribute their material as they please.
Now, it's not completely anonymous, but Ethereum can be spied on. It's pseudonymous, but it's still cool. Look, privacy's in development with this stuff, and look, they envision a future where anybody in the world's able to say what they want online without fear of censorship. That's according to their CEO.
Yeah, so buck up. Things are still okay. They're still good in the world. People are still doing cool stuff. The world is still spinning on its axis, and you're not dead, which is a good thing.
Yeah, no FOMO. No FOMO.
Wherever you're joining us from, whether it's from your hospital bed, quarantine hotel room, or if you're stuck on a cruise ship in China, it's a pleasure having you here.
Why not wash your hands, drop into our Telegram channel, and say hello?
You can find it at FOMO.show/Telegram. Know someone might enjoy this? Please feel free to share it with them.
You can find us at FOMO.show.
You can jump on our Telegram at FOMO.show/Telegram.
You can follow us on Twitter at _FOMO_show.
And on YouTube at FOMO.show/YouTube.
That's it for us here at the FOMO Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
If you like our show, why not leave us a rating in your podcast player and subscribe in your podcast app of choice or via our YouTube channel. I'm Matt.
And I'm Joe.
And as always, remember,
no FOMO.
Awesome. Oh man, we covered so much ground in that episode, man. No wonder you were up so late, mate. You did an absolutely amazing job on that.
Oh, thanks, mate.
It's incredible, man.
Oh, dude, that piece on what was it called? I keep forgetting the headline of it. It was panic buying versus stockpiling. I thought that was so smart, man. Like, it's just what I like. It's just the right mix. You're not a prepper. It's just like you're being sensible.
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, because I had that moment too when I was like, am I being crazy? Like going to the store, like it wasn't even a big deal in China at that point, but I was just like, I just kind of feel like I need to go and get stuff. Like I was just, it's probably because we've got a family now. I was kind of like, I'm just a bit worried about like what could happen, and I was like, right, going through Aldi with this shopping trolley full to overflowing with stuff, and people would look at me really weird. Like I put it down on the little elevator-y kind of thing that they pull your stuff forward on, and there was that much stuff on there that they actually couldn't do it. We had to manually push it all forward. But I wasn't doing it because I was panicking. It was just because like I was doing it because I thought it was prudent. It was like no, this is just something that's good to have. It wasn't like I bought the store out. Like I barely made a dent at that stage. But yeah, mate. Like I think that's something that particularly us as Australians and Westerners, we're not used to preparing for that kind of thing because we've never had to deal with it ourselves. Like we've never lived in Argentina, we've never lived in Greece, we've never lived anywhere where there's issues with supply chains. But like you say, mate, like it can easily happen, and it's just something that's worth thinking about.
I find it was a really good takeaway from that piece is like, it's not too late. You just if you want to build that up, don't go and do it tomorrow. Don't waste all your money. Just buy like little extras every time. 2 things of toothpaste, 2 things of deodorant, 2 things of this, 4 things of right. Like just twice as much as you might need for just a couple things. Yeah. And it's nice. It's not like there's no FOMO. There's no like rush, buy things out. It's just like, because you front run that, and that was sensible, and that was very responsible. But like for the rest of us, it's like it's not all over. Just it's cool. It's cool. Plus,
it's cool.
If you get the virus, you get the virus, and that really sucks. But if not, you'll probably get it from somebody else. So it's gonna happen.
We'll deal with it the way we've dealt with everything else.
Just throw our military at it.
We'll just print money until the thing is solved.
Yes. Oh, brilliant.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. No. That was good, mate.
Good
that was
stuff,
really
man.
good.
Good.
Yeah.
Enjoyed that. Ooh.
All right.
I'm feeling a bit sniffly.
Yeah, I got a slight twinge in my throat.
Yeah, I got a sore back. Must be.
Quarantine him. Yeah.
No. Nice.
I sprained my ankle. I need to go get a test for coronavirus.
Absolutely. You can't be too cautious in this day and age.
That's right.
This podcast.
Sorry, mate.
I beg your pardon. No. After you, I insist.
Oh, okay. If I must. This podcast.
On to death.
It's like, what's in this room? Is there some virus hanging around in this room? Okay. Let me put my mask on.
Did your voice crack up as you said I'm Matt?
I did, yeah. I'll say it again. Yeah.